Here we go. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Had one or two minor setup problems, so I'm having to move very quickly in setting this up. Basically, I found I couldn't sign on one thing and had to sign through another. And now I find I'm low on battery. And I need to work very quickly to sort things out. So please do bear with me for about a minute or so, and hopefully all be settled. And but I'm just tidying everything up for this. Okay. I hope you're all settling in and putting your seatbelts on. And yes, it's going to be a bit of a race. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. It's all gone a bit pear-shaped. And yeah, I don't know quite. Hi, Malcolm.
Hello there. Good to see you.
Yes. Hang on, I just need to double check everything. It's something, the battery went dead at the very last minute.
Oh, that's not good.
It's not good at all.
Reliable as James Hunt's car.
Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. It's all gone a bit pear-shaped. Yeah. So yeah, hang on. So I'm doing playback. It's awful situation to be in. It's for race. Yeah, yeah, sorry, that's playback of my voice. I had a moment of vanity because I was making slight panicky sounds and I didn't want people to know. So, it's I do apologize. I don't know what it is. I plan these things and then half the time something goes wrong at the last minute. And I do apologize. Especially of having kept you waiting. So I'm just going to see everything is all set up just to be absolutely sure. And if it isn't, I apologize to everyone. But yeah, it's 5 minutes late as well. Yeah, but it's it's all showbiz. But otherwise, yeah, it's oh dear. Everything okay with you?
Yeah, everything is good with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never tried to host a Zoom meeting, so
Normally they're good, but when something happens, it's oh dear.
Yeah, all a bit Pete Tong.
All a bit Pete Tong, and I've now lost. I do hope I didn't automatically get out of it. Checking order. Hang on. There's only one way I can do this. But I'm not sure whether it will all. Yeah, here we are. Oh, that's a relief. That's a relief. I think hang on, I have to get rid of the playback. Oh dear, that was yeah, it's just everything that could have gone wrong at one moment did. So yes, Rush. We're how what's your what did you think of it this time? You've seen it several times, I take it.
I've seen it once or twice before, cinema and
Yeah.
DVD, so not too many times though. I enjoyed it a lot. It's an excellent film. There aren't many Formula One pictures out there.
No.
But this was so well made by Ron Howard of all people.
Yes.
Versatile director. That's for sure. But yeah, it was hugely enjoyable being able to watch it again. Before my time, they battled 76.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's lovely seeing the old cars, the old way of living for Formula One drivers. It's the 70s, I suppose a transition period. Formula One used to be super unsafe until the 60s when Jackie Stewart said, enough's enough, we have to do something about all the people dying, all the drivers dying. And from then on it improved, but I think not until the early 90s did the death rate really just, went with Ayrton Senna and Ratzenberger. Roland Ratzenberger died. That was the tipping point. The 70s, it's still pretty dangerous into the 80s, although getting better. But yeah, really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. Well, it was, certainly it was a very hair-raising time. It was, I understand not a single season went until even the early 80s. I think not a single season went past without a Formula One driver being killed.
Right. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that bad.
It was at one stage. I remember once there was in one of my formulas when I worked at a bookshop, a new book had come out on the history of Formula One. Some of these books, in your spare time, you have a
look at.
Yeah, have a browse through, and there's what was I going to say? there was we had a browse for it, and then just the shock of all the deaths, which of each year, and so many famous names. I mean, I think it was more uncommon to be a top-notch racing driver and never get involved in a serious injury, let alone a death.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
what stage, or at least that's the impression you get.
Yeah, I don't know so much about injuries. Certainly some very famous names, some very famous people died along the way or throughout Formula One up till the 80s. I've been watching it since 85.
Yeah.
And by then, it was doing much better. Certainly from 85 onwards, it wasn't the case of every season. But certainly up to the 60s, I could believe that was the case. I'd be a little more surprised if it was like that in the 70s.
Yeah.
Although it was still, because it's transitioning into becoming a safer sport.
Yeah.
Death's perhaps not uncommon. I think in the early 70s, the sport had one world champion who won it posthumously because he had the points. No one could overtake him, but he died before the end of the season after an accident.
Who was that?
I think it was Rindt, Joachim Rindt.
That was
or Joachim. I think you pronounce that name Joachim, but I think it's Rindt. His name is Rindt.
Yeah, Jocqaim.
Okay, yeah, okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Around 1978.
No, a bit earlier, early 70s, I think. Probably, I'm thinking 72, 73.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, one driver, I mean, for those who've just joined us, we are having a bit of a morbid streak to start with, not deliberate. There was that awful one where a 25-year-old racing driver, Roger, somebody or another, was he was killed when car overturned, etc., and it was on flames, and drivers just went past whilst he was up in the car. And one of them stopped and tried to flag down support, but of course, by the time there's help, it was all too late, and they had to check again. They changed the rules.
I mean, it's the safest thing for the drivers to do, to stay in their car and stay out the way.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if that car is going to blow up because of the fuel. We see in this film, in Rush, Niki Lauda's helped. After his accident, and I was thinking while I was watching it that it's awfully brave of them, really, really brave of them to do that. It doesn't happen often. No. Senna did the same for the driver. I think in the late 80s, early 90s. He was unconscious. It was a British driver. I forget his name, but his foot was on the throttle.
Yeah.
And the worst case scenario is that he could have blown the engine and himself up. So Senna was very brave in running it towards him and then switching the car off.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the thing that would be expected of drivers to put themselves in that kind of harm's way. That's for the professionals, the marshals, the safety people. But I mean, it's a heroic thing for anyone to do.
So the film starts with where we get introduced to James Hunt first. And I think we ought to begin by, this is principally not just about the 1976 Formula One season. It concentrates on two drivers, James Hunt and Niki Lauda.
Yeah.
Sadly, both no longer with us, although when the film came out, Niki Lauda was still very much with us.
That's right, yeah.
And they were great friends. But the thing was, Hunt and Lauda were two very different people.
Yeah.
And that it concentrates on their respective temperaments. Niki Lauda was a very measured, very cerebral, very careful person. And whereas James Hunt was very louche, very casual, had issues with women and alcohol. It was two very different people. And you would have thought that they would take an intense dislike to each other. I mean, certainly because of their very different temperaments, they irritated each other on occasion, one or two occasions very much so, but they were at the same time, they had a huge respect and mutual admiration for each other. So it's worth to start off with mentioning those differences.
Yeah, they represent the old and new of Formula One. James Hunt really represents the Formula One that was probably on its way out, even in the 70s. The playboy, he was a complete playboy.
Yeah.
And we see that very strongly in the film. Niki Lauda represents the future, really, of Formula One. With he's very calculating about what he needs to do to win, not in a bad way, but we see him telling the engineers, do this, do that to the car to make it faster. He's almost unique, not quite. That I can only think of a couple of other drivers, specifically Senna and perhaps Vettel, Sebastian Vettel, who I think Senna definitely had that kind of methodical approach. I think Vettel does as well, maybe Michael Schumacher, but I'm not quite so familiar with his off-the-track background. But still, nowadays, there are no Formula One drivers like James Hunt. It's been a complaint in the past that there's too few personalities. Lewis Hamilton is the biggest personality, but not for the same reason as Hunt. But yeah, he represents the past that was on its way out or would soon be on its way out. And Niki Lauda, the more professional future. It seems odd talking about the more professional future, but Formula One was a gentleman's sport. If you had the money, you took part in it in the past. Before it became the hyper-professional sport that it has become now today.
Which we see in the first 20 minutes, don't we? Because we concentrate on Hunt and we concentrate on his sort of, not just his sort of loushness, but we then get to meet some of the people he's with. And of course, his manager's Kit Hesketh, played to Lord Hesketh.
Yeah, that's right. Who's the proverbial gentleman, aristocrat. Yes, let's put a team together. Why not? Privateer, complete privateer.
Yeah,
it was still possible to be one in Formula One. His little garage operation. It's amazing to think how they managed it. But they were Formula One up until that point. It was made for people like him.
Yeah.
But even by the time the 70s came around, though, we see with his financial troubles, it was on its way. It was changing, and he couldn't last in it. Looking now, it's amazing to think that the last privateer team, Williams, only got sold within the last year or two.
And Williams himself has died very recently.
Frank Williams died very recently, just a few months back. But he was the last privateer. They're all very corporately owned now, the teams.
Yeah, Kit Hesketh's still alive. Well, I mean, he was, what they did, in the film, he looks older than he actually is. He was in his early to mid-20s.
Right, I didn't realise he was that young. He's a great character in the film.
Yeah.
I did like the way that he kept calling James Hunt superstar or something like that. He's gave him the air of a real daddy.
Yes.
That was quite neat. I like that.
Yes.
And Bubbles, the engineer.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why he got that name, but it's a stark contrast to Ferrari, who I think are part of Fiat by then. I can't remember, but it was funny seeing Enzo Ferrari for brief seconds. They captured my image of him that I've seen from photographs very well. He died in the late 80s, about 89, 90 or so. but the photos and footage that I've seen of him, always very stern face and shaded glasses, tinted glasses. But yeah, a very different approach. The film's all about that with the drivers and with the teams, at least until Hunt goes to McLaren, who are more. No, I think they're still independent, McLaren at that point, although their founder had died by then. Yeah, it's a very stark contrasts between how the two of them personality, how they live, and their teams as well.
I mean, Hesketh practically ran it according to the film from his own home, which was a stately pile.
Yeah, probably big enough, but never going to be easy. By the looks of it from the film, it was never an easy thing for him.
No.
They didn't have the sponsors. Even back then in the 70s, it seems they needed the sponsors. You can't survive nowadays in Formula One without them, unless you're Brawn. But that's a special circumstance. But yeah, it would make sense to use the country pile for this purpose. Why build a factory when you've got one of 100 rooms to use?
Yeah, and of course we also look at both Hunt and Lauda's personal lives, and Hunt's is fairly chaotic. But then we see Niki Lauda.
He didn't have it easy either.
No, but he's persuaded, key moments when he's persuaded to go to a party hosted by Kurt Jürgens, the famed actor, who incidentally was in a film that we reviewed just under a year, well, about 7 or 8 months ago, which was the James Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me. He played the villain, Carl Stromberg. It's his house party. Although we never see Kurt Jürgens in the film, it's meant to be his house party that we see them go to, and his about to be ex-girlfriend walk out on him with luggage. He was the
yeah. That's a nice touch. That was a great scene, but uncomfortable scene.
Yes.
His co-driver, I've forgotten his name. It's not Reutemann. Ragazzoni. Trying to make friends with him, and he's just getting rebuffed until it's too late. But yeah, it was a neat way to introduce Lauda's wife, or wife to be. I love the touch with the Italians who stopped.
She stood out when they fit,
Yeah,
and you go along with it. You think they're stopping because of her.
Absolutely,
I remember when
done.
But that's it, and they seem to come out, and I forget this every time. I forget they know, and they come out, and I'm thinking, you pair of sexist whatever, and then they mean again, Niki
Lauda. Yeah. I mean, I would have done the same thing, to be perfectly honest. If I saw a great Formula One driver, stopping for him. But that was very funny. There's lots of good moments of humour in the film.
There are. He tells her that her car's been very badly serviced, and she refuses to believe him. And then, of course, the next scene is them the car on the road with the steam.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the best Formula One drivers are very sensitive to how the car works.
Yes.
Whether it's through their bum or any other part of their body. And no wonder, because the seats are so close to the floor, they're going to feel everything.
Yeah.
I could believe that he would be able to work it all out.
Yes.
With his technical mind.
Yes, you found to put the brake too far down there, and that's because there's some air between that and the way, and that's causing you no end of problems. And it's been very badly serviced, and you.
And there's the
more impressions better than mine.
The obligatory impression, yeah. I have to say, Daniel Bruhl as Lauda was perfection. He's so good.
But they were both good. Chris Hemsworth as James Hunt. I could see it. I mean, it's not just a look. it's the mannerisms, it's the way of speaking, the voice they've got, the voices they've got pretty. It's
yeah,
not often do you get it that accurate. I mean, you're never going to get it completely accurate. You're going to spot differences. I mean,
well, I think you want something that contains the essence
yeah,
of the person you're portraying, rather than a literal, which is impossible, version of them. You look at just as with a translation of a text, you're looking for the essence of it, rather than word to word. So perhaps some people like that, and that's what Chris Hemsworth gives so well.
Yeah,
and he really captures Hunt's humor, exceptionally well. I have to say, in case I forget to mention it later, if anyone wants to treat themselves, they could do a lot worse than getting onto YouTube and looking up races from the BBC, which Hunt co-commentated. Well, he was the pundit for, with Murray Walker as the commentator. They were so good together. They were such a double act, and you get all of Hunt's ironic, sardonic, sarcastic humor there.
I did catch it once. I did catch one of those. I didn't necessarily serious. He could be quite cutting.
Oh yeah. It came though from a position of knowing what he was talking about.
Oh yes.
But yeah, he didn't hold back. If he thought that a driver was in the wrong, he would say so. That was his personality, and it was so sad when he died. And I looked him up on Wikipedia to remind myself, and he was only 45 when he died.
45.
Which seems, when I was young, seemed, well, okay, middle age. But now that I'm 5 years older than he was.
And I'm 46. Oh my!
Absurdly young.
Younger than James Hunt.
But that's probably the product of the kind of life he led.
We've had a comment from Rose M. I watched Formula One in my teens and saw the crash where Ayrton Senna died. Thank God we had safer cars. I mean, we are all, some of us, of an age where we do remember racing drivers who are no longer with us. And whilst Hunt was never killed in a crash, he did die tragically young. And one could argue that there was a connection between his unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I mean, although he led a fairly clean, life towards the very end, I think his general lifestyle did some damage. And
undoubtedly, years of drinking too much, smoking, probably eating the wrong things as well, and who knows, maybe the genetics were wrong for him as well. All came together when he was 45. Ironically, when he'd finally settled down with someone, he was about to propose.
He was.
But to go back to the point, she's right about Senna. I remember watching that as well. A dreadful weekend, San Marino, but that was a real turning point for safety in Formula One. A lot of progress was made after that. The sport couldn't sustain the loss of one of its major stars, or most important drivers of all time. And I have to say, Roland Ratzenberger died that same weekend.
I was going to say the week it was just days before, wasn't it? And
it was the day before. Yeah, it was the Saturday. Ratzenberger died.
Let me check because I can find out very quickly.
He was only in his third race. And there was a very good thing that happened afterwards, that the head of the FIA, who I think at that point was Max Mosley, he went to Ratzenberger's funeral. The world was focused, unsurprisingly, on Senna's, but Mosley, as head of FIA, went to Ratzenberger's and said, well, the reason I did that, I knew that everybody would be focused on Senna. I didn't want this guy to be forgotten. He did some great things.
They died a day apart. Why did I think it was a week apart? I know Senna in that last day was pretty cut up about Ratzenberger.
He was, he wasn't. I think he had the option not to race, but he decided to, and he had Ratzenberger's. He was Austrian, so he had the Austrian flag in his cockpit, which he was hoping to unfurl if he won the race. But it was a difficult weekend all round. Rubens Barrichello, I think either on Friday or Saturday, had a dreadful accident. Fortunately, he was okay.
Yeah.
And then Ratzenberger's, and then Senna's on the Sunday. Yeah, it was awful, but much good came from it with the safety progress, which they're still doing to get still getting right today after further accidents that have happened. Notably, the halo, which looks ugly, but it's proved to be a lifesaver, particularly for Grosjean a couple of seasons ago, when his car ploughed into the barrier in Bahrain. He survived, undoubtedly because of the halo stopping the barrier from decapitating him. So, it's that's a good point that she's made.
It's I mean, I'd heard it. I remember at the time what added to that. So I knew who Senna was a big household name. It's almost, I think, the closest in recent times was, albeit it wasn't through motor racing, it was through a horrible skiing accident, and he's still with us, albeit how badly he's been.
Schumacher.
Michael Schumacher.
Yeah. One of those things. I think he was even wearing a helmet, but he struck the stone, obviously with sufficient force, and that's what caused the brain damage. But yeah, it's very sad. Life is a precious thing.
It is. And we kind of see the dangers of the lives of this. Does lead to that. There's that crucial moment where there's very heavy rain.
Yeah.
And they're having a discussion, almost like you tend to think, those who are unfamiliar with Formula One tend to think all the decisions go top down, like any other sporting organization. But the thing, what was happening here is that they were almost like a trade union. They were discussing amongst themselves, the drivers, on a vote as to whether they continued that race or postponed for another day. And this is where you see the two personalities between Hunt and Lauda. Hunt being typically Hunt and Lauda being typically Lauda come to the fore. And I was very moved by Lauda's speech. I don't know how true or how fictional it was, but I remember thinking, if I were a motor racing driver, I'd be listening to him and I wouldn't be listening to Hunt. But Hunt was very good at playing at the emotions of them. Lauda was, concentrating on cold logic.
So that meeting was the drivers' meeting that they have on, I think it's the Friday of the race weekend.
Yes.
And so because of the exceptional circumstances, the race organizers were, or the FIA were letting the drivers decide. I'd be surprised if the drivers had as much power as that.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
So that's the background to that particular meeting. They do that as far as I'm aware, every weekend of a race. They raise issues from the past that may have come up in the last meeting, and then they discuss it with the race director. And speaking of how decisions come from top down or otherwise, of course, we're in the middle of a big controversy in Formula One at the moment with what happened at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix at the end of last season over Michael Massey, the race director's role there. So interested to see the interplay of drivers and race organizer plus the head of the FIA. And again, you can get this on YouTube. There's footage I've seen from the 80s with a drivers' meeting being contentious, and Mosley's predecessor as President Balestra, who's as dodgy, as shady a character as you could hope for, but a great character, but really shady. and the drivers, Senna particularly, disagreeing with him about something, and the poor race organizer stuck in the middle, and Balestra telling everyone, I'm the boss and things are going to happen my way. So those things aren't usually filmed, but there is some footage online of these old meetings. But yeah, that's the Japanese Grand Prix at the end, and they don't really go into it in the film, but I guess the natural suspicion is that is Lauda choking it? Is he bottling it because of his accident, which would be entirely understandable? He decides he carries on racing, but then he stops. I think the film suggests, because of the flashback to his wife looking over him in the hospital, he stops because of that. But at least he went on to win the title a couple more times, so you know that he hadn't lost his edge. He was still a winner, capable of winning.
And he is accused of bottling it, and he says, "I am." I think Lauda showed true bravery in that, because he says, "I am scared." But
yeah, you're right.
But who shouldn't be scared? You know, you've got to. He said, every time I go in the car, I accept there's. You know, one instance, he says, every time I go in the car, I accept there's a 20% chance I will be killed. I don't want that percentage to go any higher.
Yeah, you're quite right. Yeah. He gets it. I mean, he got it before he had his accident. He certainly gets it afterwards. Hunt never really does.
I think he's sort of
the romantic spirit of Formula One racing.
Yeah.
We're going to get in the car, we're going to drive it to the edge and stay there, and then we're going to win gloriously. He's the Achilles of Formula One. He wants to win big, except that Achilles knew that he would die young. Hunt doesn't even consider that. He's just focused on the doing well. I guess he needed to have the same kind of accident to change, and he never did. Although that year took so much out of him, he then retired, obviously, a year or two later.
I think that might have had part of it. I know he was affected, and it shows in the film he was affected by Lauda's accident.
Yeah.
When that crucial race in the rain, I don't know where I've heard this, and I'm slightly unsure as to whether I accept this fact, but I seem to recall that he had said he really wasn't sure whether he would come out of that alive because the rain was so bad and everything else.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I've had that feeling once or twice on the M25 or on the A1 in very, very bad weather conditions. So if I get that on the motorway like that, I totally get it if you're driving that X, Y, and Z miles per hour on a racetrack with that kind of thing. So I think that affected that affected him. I think
they do show it, him being affected, but I don't think so much in Japan. Well, I guess it's hard for them to do so because the race is now on. He's racing for the win,
and it was the crucial race. Yeah.
Sorry?
It was the crucial race, wasn't it?
It was the last race of the year. Yeah, Japan, Mount Fuji, or the Fuji circuit. I forget its proper name. It's dreadful conditions. Nowadays, the race would be
cancelled.
It wouldn't be cancelled immediately. They would wait until the last moment. Well, like they did in Belgium last season, they waited as long into the afternoon as they could. And then when the rain wasn't giving up, the safety car, I think, drove them round for a lap, just so they could say, we've done a lap, we've done the race. And then they drove back into the pits. And then that was that, which is unfortunate for the fans because then they couldn't claim their money back because for the race organizer, well, it had a race, even though it wasn't really. Nowadays they would wait to see if the rain subsided. Because of TV rights and all of that, they would, I think, only cancel it in the last resort. And before then, they would do that parade lap, basically. So they could say something happened rather than absolutely nothing.
Yeah. So what would you overall would you take from the film this time round?
I think watching it, I've watching it this time, a number of things. I love the music,
Yes.
Hans Zimmer, and the
Yes.
combination, I should say, of Hans Zimmer, who's always so good, and the 70s music, which is really well used.
Yes.
Um, I loved the contrast of the characters, which you mentioned at the start.
Mm.
James Hunt's romanticized character versus Niki Lauda's realistic one.
Mm.
I love thinking about it in terms of Hunt representing the past of Formula One, Lauda the future. Seeing Hesketh and his amateur team. It's great seeing amateurs in Formula One for one of the last times,
Yes.
reminding me of the younger days, the earlier days of the sport. I mean, I don't begrudge the big manufacturers now taking charge of it. You know, sports evolve, that happens, but I love the amateurism of the past. I was a big fan of that in rugby union, but I know the world changes, so it was great seeing that. I got big respect for Ron Howard making a film about Formula One so exciting. I'd love to watch it again and think more about his placement of the scenes, because sometimes it felt like he was focusing the first part of the film on the characters, and then in the middle we get a number of Formula One races, and they flash from one to the other, and it seems odd that the film should be paced like that, but it made perfect sense, perhaps because it would be too disjointed, and the racing, it's hard to, because you can't really see the drivers there more than their eyes under the or below the helmet. It's hard to get the passion of what they're doing while showing a race. It's around the race, you have to look around it to get that. While the race is on, you can only show the car going fast this way or that way. So that I liked how he organized the scenes for the picture. And characters, music, scene pacing, just the fact that Ron Howard made this film and did it so well. I mean, I've never watched another Formula One film, so perhaps there are other good ones, but I'm not aware of many beyond the documentaries. And
there was one made called, I think it's called Le Mans 1966.
I've heard of it, but I've not seen it.
Yeah, Graham Hill has a part in it as well, playing a racing driver under a different name. So essentially, he's playing himself, but obviously, ostensibly an acting part where he's playing a racing driver who's with a fictional name.
We could definitely do with another one, for sure. Because the sport has changed so much, that would be great. But those are a few other things that I took away. The whole look of the picture was, he had it all nailed down so well, the 70s look of it. And both Lauda and Hunt in different ways come out really well from the picture. It's great that they had that respect for each other, certainly by the end or before the end. And I appreciated seeing the kind of flash forward with Lauda, or Daniel Bruhl as Lauda's voiceover at the end, showing James Hunt as he was with Murray Walker. It's great seeing a photo of him, them together, and obviously that the single shot of the older Lauda. I miss him.
Yes,
he hadn't changed. When he was a consultant with Mercedes, he was still as sharp as he ever was in the 70s.
Didn't he die of? I'm just trying to remember the cause of that with Niki Lauda. Didn't he die of health complications stemming from the injuries he received from?
I don't know that. I know he'd been in hospital, but I don't know the exact cause. I mean, he's, I think, in his 70s, so he had a pretty good run, all things considered.
He was,
but I don't know what he died of.
he was 70.
Yeah.
Death and legacy. I'm just checking. He had been undergoing dialysis treatments for kidney problems, so
Okay. Right.
but
Yeah.
probably not. But yeah,
He was a great personality
Mm.
when he was with Mercedes,
Mm.
and I think he's the one who persuaded Hamilton to join them. I
Yeah.
think. I must look that up, but he was a really he would not disappoint you in an interview. He'd say what he thought
You
straight
get the
down the line.
impression with Lauder that if you professionally worked with someone like him, it would be 50-50 as to whether you personally liked him,
That's true. Yeah,
whether
yeah.
you personally got on with him. However, what would be almost undeniable is that you would respect him.
I think so. I mean, I admire several people that if I actually worked with them or knew them, whether I actually liked them or not then
Yeah,
might be a different matter. But Lauder had no side about him,
no,
no nonsense. You would, he's not the kind of person that he's a glory hunter. He does what he wants and without care for anyone. He, if you see it in the film, he stays up late with the engineers, say, do this, do this, this. That's a great leader. If they're going to stay up late, he's there with them, directing them, and he's completely committed to the cause. So no one could think, well, like some drivers, even a great British driver, Nigel Mansell, he was about driving, going off to play golf afterwards. Niki Lauda was definitely not that. He was there to make sure the job got done as well as it could. And yet I think you would respect him for that, even if you didn't really like him, because he had a difficult personality.
yes.
But yeah, for sure.
Whereas James Hunt, I don't know. He seems very likable, and you would like him. In some matters, would you trust him? Which is
I think you trust him as a driver.
you trust him as a driver.
I mean, he had his share of accidents,
Yeah,
but I mean, he won the title,
yeah,
so you can't knock that.
yeah.
He did well in Formula One up until he quit it. So, and he was the real deal, and that you see that in his commentary with Murray Walker. He's not just there being lazy about it. He knew the sport inside out, so he was smart. Yeah, he lived fast and alas died young, but he was not a layabout by any means. He was the real deal. It's just that he liked the parties, he liked his girls, he liked his drink, smoking and what have you. That's just how he was. But maybe you would trust Lauda more because he came across as more professional and was.
Yeah.
But I think my knowledge of Hunt's private life or his race life is far from perfect. But say, with the example of the film, it doesn't show me anything that suggests that he was a danger to himself and others. There have been drivers in Formula One like that you just wouldn't want to go near, but he was definitely not one of them. Those drivers don't win titles, or probably even get into the top teams. So, yeah, he was the real deal, as much as Lauda was. Not in the same class, but yeah, he was no fool. He was a great driver.
In fact, his last broadcast, his last commentary with Murray Walker, I think was recorded either the day before he died or the day he did die.
Right.
Because he died very late in the evening. Shortly before midnight, in fact, I think, if I remember correctly, but he wasn't found to the following morning.
Right.
But and
Yeah.
it was morbid. But it was that late. What I mean,
Well,
I'm trying to say is
it took years for commentary to get to anything near that level.
Yeah.
Martin Brundle is the natural successor to James Hunt now.
Yes, and we don't we've lost Murray Walker as well.
because he was still racing back then.
Yeah. So yeah, different. It's basically a film where you just see a changeover from the old world to the new world, and that's certainly what I got from it was the human element, but how the human element also affects the driving to varying degrees. I think if Nicky Lauda wasn't difficult, he would never have been as good a driver as he was. If James Hunt wasn't so cavalier, he wouldn't have been as good a driver as he was. Their personalities played to those respective strengths, but they also kind of knew when to quit in their different ways. And knew when to walk away. For Hunt to walk away, I think showed exceptional strength, especially given his personality. So I got a fair bit from that. But yeah. Oh, I say that, and I was looking away, and Malcolm's just said my internet's cut out. Right. Well, this is a fair thing. I wasn't looking at the screen properly when I was summing up, and yeah, I got this sense of silence. I should have checked up on it. So what am I going to do? I think what I'll do is, as we're coming to the end of this anyway, I will just send a message to Malcolm. Please bear with me, viewers, and I suspected something. I was starting to sum up anyway. And have let viewers know, will sign off and give your apologies. So yes, Malcolm. Oh, after all that.
Hello.
I was literally, whilst talking to viewers, writing out a message to you on sort of.
I'm sorry. I think that was my internet failing there.
That's fine. I wasn't looking at the screen when I was summing up, so I was sort of saying about how it played to their respective strengths as race drivers and everything, but essentially I was summing up. But this is what I got from the film, and that they both knew when to quit when they did in their different ways. The Hunt must have been a wrench.
Yeah, I wonder who would have been a bigger wrench for, him or Lauda.
There were different circumstances. I think with Lauda, obviously his accident played a part in that.
Yeah.
And left at top of the game, but maybe that was part of the attraction for Hunt. Leave whilst at top. Leave whilst I'm still alive. Leave. Whilst I'm ahead of the game, and he had his other. He had a hinterland, and I think when you're in a vocation of a secular nature, having the hinterland is extremely important. And he had his budgerigars.
Yes, that's true.
And he did do one or two. He liked his old-fashioned comedy. He appeared in what's his name? The short silent film, The Plank. The films that what's his name? Eric Sykes did.
Okay, I didn't know that.
He was in The Plank, which helped that they're obviously short color films, but they were essentially silent. So
right.
Yeah.
Oh, there we are.
But I think Hattie Jakes is in that. Is it just about her last film? But yeah, they did. It did play to what I got out of the film this time is it did play to their respective strengths of the two main drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully made film.
Indeed, Ron Howard is a top-notch director.
It really is.
To those who haven't seen Frost Nixon, I do recommend it because he is very good at the the human side of all of these things. So yeah, well, thank you very much once again, Malcolm.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Hope we do another film review in about a month's time or so, but this was a good one. I'm sorry about the awful beginning, and
I'm sorry about the awful end.
Yeah,
not to worry, we got there.
Mistakes happen. The trick is not to let them phase you and just keep going.
Okay, yeah, we got there. But yeah, I look forward to another film in a month or so. And I especially look forward to in September, we if it's possible to talk about the new Tolkien Rings of Power. I'm very excited about that.
We will see. We will see.
But whatever we come up with in a month, look forward to that. Be grand.
Well, all the best, Malcolm.
You too.
Good evening.
And see you on the highways and byways of social media. And thank you to everyone for watching.
Cheers. Goodbye, everyone, and goodbye.